Hey, well, I'm going to try to make sure I go where I'm supposed to go here. There I am. One moment as I tweak this guy. There we go. All right. Look at that. That's nice. Hello, everybody. I'm trying to fix the things. Sometimes you automate it. Sometimes you can't automate it. My name, I hope that works. There we go. Mark Tomlinson, over there. The chief performacologist here at PerfBits, whatever. One of the co-founders. Welcome to the weekly PerfBits, which is PerfBit, which is a little bit late today because I had to get in the car and drive to my office to help my coworker Cliff do something on a machine that's in the office that you can only do when you're in the machine in the office. And then traffic, for whatever reason, here around Philadelphia was absolutely horrible. So thanks to everyone who was driving really, really slow. I'm happy to be with you. It is the first in February of our PerfBits, and I didn't want to miss it because this week is the first week that I have decided the question of the week on the PerfBits Discord, PerfBits Cafe. And in Twitter, sometimes I post a question of the week or a question of the day kind of thing about performance. And I wanted to cover that this week. And so this will be the first week that I put the question out on Monday. And then by Friday, I can kind of cover the topic. You guys get a hint as to what the topic might be, which is pretty cool. But before I get rolling with any of that, there's a bunch of announcements. A bunch of really, really great stuff was happening. This week, if you missed it, I'm so sorry, but there'll be some videos coming out, was CMG, our friends in Computer Measurement Group, had CMG Impact, was virtual all week this week. And it's a fantastic, one of the oldest communities for performance, mainframe performance, web performance. I had the honor of being a recipient of a stipend or a program that allowed me to travel around and give a talk. And it's a great, great bunch of people who are equally enthusiastic around performance. So check out CMG Impact, another great community that's for performance engineers. Event-wise, the other stuff that's happening, and I'll probably forget some, so I forgot about that. Next week, there was one, I think, this week as well. This week, I think, or last week, was Redline 13, and I think it was Load Test World. Look on Twitter, at Load Test World. And I got disconnected somehow or didn't follow through with I was going to give a talk and stuff, and I totally screwed it up. It was my bad. But if you've not checked out Redline 13, I think it's Redline 13. It's sort of a JMeter-based test harness, very similar to the stuff I build and use myself, running in the cloud. They're known, I think they're local here in the Philly area, and a great bunch of folks. So Richard and follow them, Redline 13 and Load Test World. They equally have some videos and stuff that they had put out there, which is a great thing to do. Next week, our friends at Dynatrace have Dynatrace Perform, and of course, around Dynatrace Perform are some of our favorites of the PerfBits sponsorship world. So Tricentis, there's going to be some stuff overlap. What would be Tricentis Neoload in the Dynatrace family. So Henrik's old work with Neoload works in with Tricentis and Perform with Dynatrace. So check out, thank you to Tricentis, but they have some sessions next week. Perform is a free online conference. Our good friend Andy will be on, Andreas Grabner will be, Herr Grabner will be on the stage. So he's got some main stage stuff happening, not that that's unusual. Our friends at Akamas, so I think it's Luca. There's two Lucas at Akamas. Akamas does some really amazing stuff in terms of tuning and optimization. They do much more than that. But if you're in the APM or digital experience world, when you're looking at host monitoring, especially in the Dynatrace world of monitoring systems for APM, what these guys do is go one step further from, okay, now you can gather all this rich data. Are you seeking and trying to find, either through machine learning or simple rules, opportunities to tune and optimize the system? So check out Akamas. And we may be doing some stuff with them here in the PerfBits world. I know we talked to them last fall. So Akamas is a Perform sponsor. So Dynatrace Perform is beautiful. Next week, I was going to be teaching for Covaris. I picked up last fall just teaching a class, like a 3-day workshop on performance, load, and stress testing. It's a fun class. I'm tweaking the curriculum a little bit, but it's a sort of a fantastic and sort of famous in TechWell. So Covaris would be the training arm of the TechWell world. And that was going to be next week, but we just didn't, coming out of the holidays when nobody signed up for it. And it recurs, I think, every quarter or something like that. Also, potentially, in Star East, so in April, late of April, I might be down there. So if you want to come do training with me in person, I'm fully vaxxed, put your mask on, we'll get into a classroom and we will sweat it out, so to speak. But it is a really fun introduction. If you're a new QA manager or a dev manager, putting together a practice for load testing, stress testing, thinking about performance conceptually, as well as processes and practices and how to actually get something effective set up and done. I have, for years, done my own intro to performance, which is more individual for an engineer. But I bring a lot of those same concepts into this new class, so check that out. The other fantastic thing that's happening, our friends at Software Test Professionals, so much news this week. What is going on? The Inflectra and Inflectrocon, another famous, really good virtual experience, virtual conference experience, is... They have Inflectrocon, and our friends at Software Test Professionals, Rick and Peggy. Rick is now working with Inflectrocon, so we've done PerfBits live at STP. So I think the conference is in May, maybe the beginning of May, in the DC area, just south of me here, in the Northeast. I'm in the Mid-Atlantic. They're the sort of other end of the Atlantic, I guess you'd say, but not as far as Florida. So there you go. So check out Inflectrocon and STPCon at Inflectrocon. So we're kind of continuing as Software Test Professionals in the Inflectrocon world, which is pretty cool. And we'll see what we can do there. I know I may be doing some STP Radio, which is the other podcast I had done for years in support of the STP community of Software Test Professionals in the software testing world. I'll probably do some more of that. I had some of my best interviews that I've really enjoyed, and we really got into some great conversations. Long form, hour and a half. Michael Bolton, I think we have like 3 hours worth of recording where he and I are just riffing on stuff. Not as musicians, because he and I are both musicians, but on testing stuff. So anyway, that Inflectrocon is coming up in May. There's tickets available now. And last but not least, definitely not least, TSQA, TSQA, the Triangle Software Quality Assurance Association, has their conference, and they also are going to be online. I think it's a token amount. I want to say a token amount because they should definitely be charging more for what they provide. And PerfBits, again, was we did a live podcast right when the pandemic was hitting in 2020, and then it's every 2 years, so we're right on schedule for that. Some really fantastic speakers at TSQA. So lots of news in terms of events, many of them virtual, a few of them in person. And let's all just get our good vibes happening to end this pandemic. Let it become endemic. I'll have a COVID shot, once a year as a nasty flu shot. I'm good with that. That's fine. Anyway, all right. Shout out to our other sponsors. Abstracta just joined us. You'll see some things from them. I think we're going to do some deep dive episodes. They have some really cool innovations, and little did I know, they're kind of the behind the scenes engineering brains behind some fantastic JMeter contributions. And I'm a big JMeter user just because it works. It's great. So Abstracta, we welcome your support and sponsorship of PerfBits generally, and we'll see some new content coming in the next couple of weeks and months, probably the rest of the year, who knows. We really had a nice time talking to Freddie about that. Ryan Folk in the Folk Consulting world, delivering professional services with multiple different performance tools and tooling and a few other things, right? I mean, if you're kind of short on how to think about IT at scale, Ryan's guys are really good for that, so special thanks to Ryan. And still great noise coming out of Catchpoint APM and the web page test stuff. Wow. That's pretty cool. I had a chance to actually see the videos, so go check out Catchpoint and the web page test. They're making waves in the web perf, the dudes on the front end, which is pretty cool. All right, so PerfBits this week, the question of the week, and if I was really cool, I'd like put a little logo thing up on the screen right here or something. The question of the week was, what are the first 5 steps that you habitually do in diagnosis of a performance bottleneck, a problem? When you find a problem or you're told, hey, there's a bottleneck or something's slow, what are the first 5 steps that you do? And someone can put it in the comments. There's a link to the tweet or somewhere in Discord on that. If you want to join the Discord, send me a DM. Just say, hey, go look for it. We'll go find it. It's a PerfBits Cafe. The interesting thing about the question of the week, sometimes it's a total hit and you get really funny answers. Because the one I did was like, what's the difference between load and stress testing? Wrong answers only. And that thread is hilarious. Shout out to Eric Pregler. There are some really funny things. There were only a few people, Fred A. And Paul Grisafi, I think. I was like, you'll get extra credit if you can illustrate your 5 steps in like a slide deck or a flow chart. And of course, Paul, thanks Grisafi. He says, does UML count? And I'm like, yes, of course, we will allow UML if you really want to be a nerd. But most importantly, it got even me to stop and think again. What are those first 5 steps? And so often if you're in a repeated continuous performance practice on the pipeline and you're doing this kind of work every day, you sort of forget where it all starts. You're kind of always baked into monitoring things and looking at things and diagnosing things and anomaly detection and traceability and that kind of stuff. But so this got me to stop and really think, if I maybe was completely new to a project or a problem, or I was completely new, even like a consultant, and I would step out and I would do that. And I'm going to try to go to cam 2 here, see if that works. No, it didn't totally work. I got to go there and then go there. Here I am in the corner again. I still got to work that out. What are the first 5 steps? And so I'm gonna just do them right out here because I didn't present a PowerPoint deck because I don't do PowerPoint. And one of my habits, the very first thing I do with any performance problem, is I try to split the system in half, right? In half, 1/2, 50%, however you want to say that. And because I want to save time, usually if you have something going wrong and it's an escalation of some point, you have to figure out really quickly which way to turn. And if you have an access, the first thing would be if I have access to a whole system. So let's say here's a bunch of client browsers. These are clients. And of course, they're coming in over our internet connection. Maybe there's 2 internet connections, and this is the web. And so we have clients coming in, and then there's an array of sort of web servers. Maybe there's some app servers. There's another API server or something. All this traffic's coming in and doing all of this stuff. And then we have, database number 1, and then we have the calls to a giant mainframe-looking thing, which is another database. And we have some other partner services that are going out to their data stores on the web, right? So back-end partner kind of stuff. There's a whole lot of stuff happening on the front end, a whole lot of stuff happening on the back end, and I like to split the system in half. So if I have access to everything that I could see, let's say I have a good RUM tool running on the front end, and I have access to database monitoring software. Maybe it's DPA, SentryOne, maybe it's native tools within Oracle or SQL Server, or DB2, or even time series databases. I'm a big InfluxDB user. And so there's fantastic internal metrics about the health of all the shards and all the series that are running within Influx. So shout out to the Influx guys. And if you have access to the whole system, I try to go somewhere in the middle. Just cut the system in half. And look for, in the middle of that, look for queued requests. Queued requests of some kind, right? Queued requests where we have increasing load coming into the front end, and somehow things start to get either slow on the back end and we're queuing up requests in the middle because the stuff on the back can't go fast enough. So by cutting the system in half and looking for something in a web app tier about stuff being backed up, because somebody probably came and said, hey, this whole end-to-end is taking 15 seconds. Okay, well, is it taking 2 seconds on the front end and 13 on the back end? Or is it taking 12 seconds on the front end and 3 seconds on the back end? And by cutting the system in half, I'm like, okay, if there's no queued requests, I know everything back here is probably fast, and we should start looking at the health of the front end system. Could be a caching issue in the web page, could be something in the connectivity. So this first step in triage has always been critical for me because I don't want to take more time than is necessary, and potentially the CEO or VP doesn't want me to do that either. So, by the way, you can chat me if anyone is actually watching. I will see the, there's the Restream.io, and I can chat people. So if you have questions or thoughts about this, queued requests in the middle, if there are queued requests, that means these guys are coming in really fast and something is backing up in the back end. So we got to check that out. I'm going to move that over there just so I can keep an eye on what's happening here. So my first step is always try to split the system in half. And one of the challenges I had was greetings. I think it's Leodan, El Master, I like that. Greetings from Mexico, hola. Buenas noches. It's, if you're in Mexico, it's getting, well, it's the evening, not so late. But if you only have access, one of the challenges is, well, what if you don't have access to the back end or you only have access to the front end? I still might try to split this in half. Like what you can see, try to cut it in half and say, well, the internet connection, you know, ping times are really fast. Like let's leave the browser client or the client out of the picture. Is my back end call in the first step fast and healthy? Okay, so I could say, no, the back end here is unhealthy from the connection is halfway through. So this looks nice and fast. Let's go looking at the standard web perf. What's the grade? Are we missing caching headers, repeated, you know, kind of things happening within the client rendering itself? And this might not be a browser. It could be a mobile device. It could be a classic two-tier kind of application, a fat client of some kind. If you have access not even to the front end and only the back end, well, you might still be able to say, are there differences? Hey, is it one of these three? So I'm going to split it in half by saying, let's look at, is it this data source or this data source, or is it this data source? So I might cut it in half that way, but split up the different system, whatever you can see, try to cut it in half so you can make a decision, either I'm going upstream or I'm going downstream, depending on those pieces. Now, here comes the interesting thing as I set that aside, and I wrote down my notes, because I have notes. There are notes right here. What are the different things that I do in step number 2? Step number 2, I call it traverse the system that I can see, right? So let's say I've identified that there's a problem within the app server, but I have in the app server, I have a couple different processes. Maybe there's a core process. This whole thing, there's incoming web, there's low-level network, right? So I have network adapters. I have internally, I have some disk logging. So I have CPU, disk, memory, network happening at the lower level of my app server. And then I have the ASP app, and I have IIS infrastructure, and I have a couple other services and processes that run on that box. Traverse the system, I will start looking from the physical up. So I've figured out that we're queuing requests. Let's say it's slow on the back end, and requests are coming back up the wire into this box, and they're queuing somewhere in here. So are they queuing because of a physical problem? So I'll start, because usually monitoring-wise, most everyone has access to CPU, disk, memory, and network because they're built into every operating system. So I can monitor CPU, disk, memory, network, and say, well, which one of those looks the worst? Oh, CPU is 100%. Okay. Then I work up from CPU. What process is at the top of that stack? Oh, it's 2 processes. Okay, so there's two processes attacking one another and having, you know, acknowledgement issues and they're blocking or they're blocking one another but latching really fast over and over. Or we're out of memory, so we look for different exceptions for out of memory errors. So I'll start with physical and then draw inferences from those to process within the operating system, right? And there may be other operating, some physical to process to application. So if I can't really find one particular usually I'll find a process and then you find the application, could be an app pool or a particular website, web application of some kind, if it's running PHP, if it's running some kind of node or server-side JavaScript or something like that. Or you have an app server in like old enterprise stuff, like an SAP app server. The application level, we may have introduced logic in the application level that the process is going out of control. And maybe we're seeing network issues in that classic N+1 issue with a database source back here, right? So we're seeing the number of calls is crazy and it's actually flooding the network, or the process is now just thrashing of some kind, right? So I traverse the system first vertically, up and down. And then once I get into a level, then I want to surf around inside the application level, left and right. So figure out what particular service, what particular piece of code, what particular component running at the app layer might be taking up all that time according to a process or application. And it just dawns on me that this has been my brain working this way for years and years. And I'm recently doing an evaluation of the Dynatrace software, but I see this now in almost all the APM tools, that there is sort of host level, service level, process level, service level, application level, and then maybe even business level. So good on our APM vendors for tuning in to that. That's pretty cool. All right, step 3, because I had to come up with 5 steps. Why did I say 5 steps? I'd be done by now, right? But it really made me think about it. The other thing that I do in my step 3 is look at problems. I'll say problem timeline. And that's from a problem started somewhere before, otherwise I wouldn't know about it. And then let's say that this is now, like whatever the current time is now. And you make an assumption when you're doing performance triage work that somewhere here, way back here, things were healthy. Healthy, right? We had a healthy system, healthy CPU, disk memory, network, physically, whatever, all. So I try to figure out, where did things start to go wrong? Was it at, let's say, 1 p.m., 1:30 p.m., somewhere between 1 and 1:30, CPU started to go up. And then CPU stayed at like 98% for a couple hours. And then it just dropped off recently. This is a really interesting one. Actually, this is a real problem. Like a bad query plan in the database, and the optimizer, at least in SQL Server, can be very finicky at times, especially if you're right on the threshold, one of the edges of one of the internal decision makers, or the thresholds of one of the metrics that it uses to figure out how to optimize a query. And if you haven't pinned a query, the optimizer will sometimes figure out, I think you should use this other plan. Well, you can have situations where, according to like data volume and growth, during a load test where you're adding more records, suddenly the optimizer will flip you over and give you a bad plan. And it's because you're doing very, very uniform kinds of activity during a load test. The next thing that happens is like, hey, DBA, can you log in and take a look at this? And the minute they log in and do a select statement, boom, the optimizer flips it back and everything runs great. You're like, oh. So we really are missing an index somewhere in there. But just even logging in and changing the pattern for read writes will flip the thing back to the original good plan by accident. So these things can happen. All right, so step number 3 is, when did it start? Yep, find the beginning and ending. And you go back to figure out and then examine the metrics to say, what does a healthy state look like if you're unfamiliar with the system? And then try to compare that and diff those. Here's the system running healthy, here's the system running unhealthy. And try to compare those two in a graph. Like, here's CPU, disk, memory, network, and they look like that. And then during the problem, here, I love different colored white, here's the problem state, and then the CPU is like that, system time. So we had someone pushed a bad patch to a HBA or firmware or kernel driver or something. Really interesting. So you could have an update. Oh, what happened? That's the other thing. You could look for events that happened in them. Maybe there's a deployment that happened here, but traffic, started ramping up enough to actually see the problem. So I try to my third step is to figure out timelines, but the purpose of going back in time is just, what's the last known good state? And if you find something like a software deployment, patches, updates, maintenance, then you're on your way to determining, hey, we should roll back to whatever the previous, or roll forward, whatever to the previous version. And do that. So that would be cool. So that's step number 3. When did it start? Figure out the timeline before and after. Again, if you're in some of the APM tools that are really cool, they'll have like problem timelines you can replay, which is pretty cool. All right. And then in the triage, step number 4 is I just say it's repro, right? Reproduce. If you can't, if it's appropriate, the fourth thing what I would do is like repro or reintroduce. Try to reintroduce the thing that caused the problem. Now, it might still be in an outage or in a problem state. It might still be crappy performance right now. So you don't have to reintroduce anything. If anything, you're like, I need to fix this right away. If you're in SRE in production, you're like, don't reintroduce it. I want to get this thing out of here. So, but if you're in a state where somebody then says, we don't know how this happened, or we don't know exactly what caused it, but according to my first 3 steps, I know when, I know what was healthy, I figured out what process, what application. I've done a lot of narrowing down to figure out there's something with this version of this process or this version of this app or some state where how do I get that process or that app to do the same thing again? And usually in my own thoughts, this is like, if I can reproduce it, then I want to add it to my suite of performance regressions. There's the 99% CPU issue, right? So if we go back in here, we found out that it was, let's call it Bob EXE, whatever that is. Bob's your uncle. Bob EXE hits 99%. And what we wanted to reintroduce was a network condition of greater than, say, 3 seconds latency to an external service, right? Something like that. And it goes into a retry storm, and that retry storm, because something's wrong within that EXE, it takes the CPU to 99% because it's trying over and over again, like a retry storm. So then if I can successfully reintroduce this, maybe I use service virtualization and imposter, then I will include this Bob hits 99%. Well, then we pretty much narrow down and we prove what it is. But I want to investigate, is it even possible to reintroduce that so that we can diagnose a fix for it, which is very important, right? If there's a fix, a patch to the Bob EXE. But forever moving forward in the future of the company, I have the 99% Bob scenario that every build moving forward that comes through to get tested will have to pass the 99% Bob scenario and all the details for it. So step 4, I spend time, and this may not be in production. Again, this may be, we kind of solved, we backed out that version of Bob EXE, but now we need to figure out how to fix Bob.exe and retest it to make sure it never happens again. And so you have to test the fix to make sure the fix actually does prevent what you want it to prevent. So being able to repro or reintroduce that condition requires the first 3 steps, but then you're going to create a scenario, 4-step. Can I reintroduce Bob, that 99% Bob? And apologies to everyone out there named Bob. I mean no offense whatsoever to that. The last step, number 5, is explain it. Explain it. And that's usually good. A lot of people do after action reports. It's kind of, I guess that's maybe even a military reference, I guess. but it's some kind of triage or retro where you're talking about how you found it, how it's explained, where the anomaly happened or what the issue was for the bottleneck, what the repair for it was, what are your plans to do that. And I think then explaining it, in particular step 5 for me, I'm like, the thing that I miss out, because we're really good at getting into the weeds on the technology. We can explain stuff till we're blue in the face, and everyone to some extent that maybe matters more than us as engine nerds are how do we impact those and what is the impact? And the impact I'll say in particular, for us, systems. What's the impact of systems? This repair to bob.exe is that it only retries every 1 second, which means if we go into a retry condition, our SLA of 250 milliseconds, we're gonna blow our SLA. So is there some implication, some impact to the way we operate our systems? What's the impact to our operations, our systems, to that extent? And then the second part would be customers. So if we had an SLA, or we have, people are like, I don't know what's going on with, bob.com. Bob.com is running slow. Well, we put in a patch whereby we didn't isolate ourselves from a queuing perspective to the remote third party. But for some reason, what's the impact to the customers? Are they going to be satisfied, dissatisfied? What's your AppDex score? Basically everything, explaining it technically is good, but what's the impact to how the systems operate? What's the impact to customers? And then of course, I think for a lot of us, it's what's the impact to the business? Are there contractual things that we will stop thinking about? We will violate, sorry. We don't have a good answer to say, contractually, we don't know exactly how to solve this. So I'm gonna go there, go there, go there. I think we're good, back in business. I had to put the logo, if I can. Did the logo go up there? There it is, look at that. So that's my 5 steps. 5 steps, oh, wait a minute, I threw it on the floor. Real-time television, right? My 5 steps: 1, split the system in half. The second thing you do, traverse the system up and down. So usually starting from the base physical resources up through the kernel, the operating system, the processes, and the application, and then look left and right around what's happening up in that level. Step 3, understand the timeline. And can you go back in time to a healthy standpoint, to a healthy point in time, and see what happened, what changed, and understand the context for change over time, for problem timeline is really good. Step 4, if you could reintroduce it, is there a way to reproduce it and reintroduce this change to prove it? And then also that prepares you to prove that you can fix it. You can fix the issue. Really, really important to reintroduce and figure out, to see if it happens again and see if it can be retested, and then make that scenario part of your everyday performance regression. Really, really important. And then last but not least, of course, once we've had all the fantastic technology conversations, we have to kind of step back and look, hey, how is everything we understand now with our comprehensive understanding, what's the impact to our systems and how we operate them? Do we need to make adjustments or changes, thresholds? Do we need to prepare different triage, other response procedures and things like that? What's the impact to customers? Like, how is this going to impact them at all? Or will we should see a hit to the AppDex score or some, basic customer satisfaction to the solution that we came up with? And last but not least, customers are close to the business, but there might be other contractual downsides to how we're operating that impact the business in ways that are not just one customer, but maybe, hey, our trajectory for this huge event that's going to happen in, let's see, this weekend, the Super Bowl. For everyone that's load testing for the Super Bowl, I hope you did all your work now. Get ready. Right now, it's just, have a good SWAT team room, or have the war room bridge. It is war, I think. Anyway, yeah. So that's my 5 steps. And maybe I'll type. I should type them up. I should have show notes and I should have closed captions. So those are feedback I got recently, and I'm going to keep working on how to do that as I go forward here. It should be an expectation. I just am getting going here. So thanks very much for joining. If you have thoughts on the 5 steps, initial steps of triage, let me know. You can put it down in the comments over here. Of course, if this is on YouTube, one of the other things I'll mention to you, if you're watching this on Twitch, I didn't know this because I've never been a big Twitch user except for some Dungeons and Dragons stuff. And I didn't know that like Twitch videos are ephemeral. They disappear. Maybe I have to sign up I'm just a basic Twitch user. But I'm also streaming this every week to Facebook. I have my own local copy, so, for archival purposes. But additionally, you can, if you're on YouTube, that's where they'll continue to live for quite a while because PerfBits has sort of YouTube business account and stuff. So we have enough storage to store everything. So if you're not seeing this on Twitch or you're like, hey, I want to go back and see one of the previous episodes, head on over to the YouTube channel under PerfBits. Just look for PerfBits on YouTube and away you go. You'll be good to go. Thank you everyone for joining. Again, thanks and a shout out to all the sponsors, supporting sponsors of PerfBits. Catchpoint APM, Tricentis, of course, with Neoload and Flood, Tricentis, Ryan Folk and Folk Consulting, and of course now Abstracta. Akamas is just a friend of the show, but we might do something with them. But Abstracta, so Freda and Sophia and the folks at Abstracta, you'll see some cool stuff coming for there. Thank you guys very, very much. We do have a Discord server community that I'm kind of working on, and I'll put more of these questions of the week into the Discord server. If you want a link to get to the Discord server, I think there's a couple tweets out there with a link to it. You can sign up, you can join. We have a code of conduct. It's well moderated, so there's no shenanigans or anything harmful or any BS happening on the PerfBits Cafe. It's a really happy, shiny, good place to get intense answers and support from your brothers and sisters in the performance testing world. Thank you guys. Have a fantastic weekend, and I will see you next week. I automated the outro, so let's see if the outro now works. You ready? All right. Ciao.